Chris May, how's it going? Welcome to the Cross Arts Extravaganza. This is question number 1. Can you possibly describe your current artistic practice, please? So what you do, how you do it, etc. I look forward to hearing from you. Till then, ciao.
Hello, I'm Chris Paul Daniels. How I describe my creative practice is a artist filmmaker, which is a useful term just because of the kinds of films that I make, which aren't particularly conventional, and they are shown in art spaces and some cinemas, but mainly kind of festivals that are kind of sympathetic to different and experimental film practices. I also sometimes work with musicians in live contexts. So the last project in that way was with a guy called Sven Helbig, where I did live video alongside Manchester Camerata performing Sven's album Pocket Symphonies.
Hey Chris, thanks for that answer, man. Really interesting to hear your response. On to question number 2. Basically, could you just define how you see your practice as being cross arts, and maybe you could use the case of your work with Sven Helbig that you talked about as an alleyway into that. Cool. Look forward to the answer. Bye.
Hello, back at home. What defines my practice as being cross arts is a good question. I don't know if it does. I know that I've worked in different kinds of ways with different kinds of people. I think filmmaking is by default collaborative in some ways, in that like the person who holds the camera might not always be the same person who edits or directs or writes. A lot of the time in my practice it is. I do a lot of stuff on my own, but I work with musicians irregularly. As I say, Graham Massey has done quite a few of my soundtracks to recent short films. But I have worked in what is probably more of a cross arts way, in terms of live video performance. So I mentioned before with the previous question, Sven Helbig was this was a commission. I did a live video performance for Manchester Camerata and Sven Helbig, and it was for Home, which is a multi-arts venue in Manchester. So I guess that's interesting in that it's a cinema, a theatre, and an art gallery. And yeah, we performed in the gallery, and I had Sven Helbig's album Pocket Symphonies, which was performed live by him and Manchester Camerata, and I was projecting onto 2 big walls in the gallery space with the Camerata sat in the middle, the audience kind of surrounding the Camerata, and we had 2 opposing screens that were projected onto the walls. And that was like, I had quite a long time to prepare for that, so I was quite tight with the editing. I was able to like really know the album because it was already written and recorded, so I could practice in my studio. And it was all performed using VJ software. I used my own video material, but also I used quite a lot of archive from the Northwest Film Archive, which is based in Manchester, and I was able to be very responsive to the musicians as they played, in that I could change in a very immediate sense what was being projected with the video material. But I had already kind of rehearsed this and practiced this and edited to the tracks. What has happened in the past, which has included working with the Nape Music Masters, is that a lot of material's been generated in a very quick amount of time. So I might have like I did a project again with Home in Manchester where we went to Wuhan, supported by the British Council. Wuhan's Manchester's twin city in China, and we had 8 days to perform, like as in write, create. Musicians had 8 days to create the material, and filmmakers had 8 days to go and shoot and then perform in a live context. So that's very cross arts in that, like, it's across different mediums, and I tend to work that way maybe once or twice a year. I've worked with Urknall in the Netherlands, based in The Hague. I've performed this way in Kenya and China, and Iceland and Sweden and the Netherlands with the Nape Music Masters. So yeah, in terms of cross arts, that's probably the most defined bit of my practice that could be called cross arts. I think working as an artist and a filmmaker, it becomes its own terminology and its own kind of like different ways of describing it. But in terms of like going from one discipline to the other, especially working with musicians, then these kind of live video things, using a program called Resolume, enables me to sort of work in a different way, in that it's a performative way. It's not edited and then sent as a video file to different places like my films are, or installed like sometimes I might work with in a gallery. It's something that can be created quite freely and of the moment and be quite transient. So, lengthy answer there, thank you.
Morning, Chris. Thanks a lot for your answer to number 2. It's really, really nice to hear your thoughts and perspectives there. Moving on to question 3, we're just interested in some approaches that you might employ when exploring cross-arts collaborations that you do, technical issues, aesthetics that you might choose, etc. Thanks. Bye.
Hi. So question 3. Things that I do to approach cross-arts projects. I've spoken a bit about how I use VJ software to perform video live, which is obviously very different to editing footage and script and sound and making it a finished, complete film that plays exactly the same every time. So with the VJ software, I need to kind of have a lot of time to prepare the clips. It takes longer to encode them in a specific format so that they can just be triggered by clicking on the specific clips. But more than that, in terms of working in a cross-arts way with musicians, I think it's always worth having a discussion in advance about the just the different working practices. So in terms of when I've worked with musicians, always incredibly jealous, incredibly in awe of the ability to people to turn up and start creating reasonably instantly. Obviously, a lot of rehearsal and a huge amount of discipline goes into being at that level where you can do that. But say just with the Camerata, where obviously Sven had prepared a paper, the music was on the paper in front of the musicians, but they just turned up and they could play. And it was incredible to just see them do that. For me, I'd been working on the project for a number of months just to get to that point where I could play that video footage with the musicians. And I've done other projects where they have been made in 8 days or 10 days or less. But it's still going to take me a number of hours to go and shoot something, to edit it and prepare it in order to bring it into the software, in order to perform it live, instead of just bringing out an instrument and being able to play. That is in no way not being completely in awe of people's level of discipline to practice and be at a incredibly high level of musicianship to be able to do what the musicians that I've collaborated with do. But it's just a difference technically in terms of like, I need a computer, I need a camera, I need a HDMI lead to a projector, and I need a screen. So technically my needs are quite different to the acoustics of a room and the kind of the sound setup, which again is obviously a lot of stuff that I am not completely versed in. I have some awareness of, but just through working in cross arts projects. So that understanding of like not just the technical requirements, but the actual durational needs of both kind of parties of a collaboration is important. Will that do?
Hey Chris, thanks a lot for your answer to number 3. It's really important to begin to outline some of those technical difficulties and practice difficulties that may come up with these cross arts explorations, and to be able to really understand each other's working disciplines. So that's really insightful, thanks. And maybe tying that on to question 4, we're just interested in some of your key learning moments in your education and career so far that have stimulated ideas and really sort of begun to galvanise your practice. So yeah, some key learning moments. Thanks man, and thanks so much for taking part in this interview. Ciao ciao.
Hi. So part 4 we've got here. What have been my key learning moments related to making or collaboration? Is a good question. So we met first of all doing a project on the Nape Music Masters in Iceland, which was kind of only the second time I'd worked with musicians. The first being with the students from the Guildhall School of Music when I was a student at the Royal College of Art in London. And I think the first time that we worked together in Iceland, I was quite fresh and quite. I probably tried to do a bit too much. I wasn't necessarily performing the things live. I was trying to do them with pre-edited material, which is a bit messy. I think I probably made the visuals a bit too flashy, like stroby. I made them too loud, therefore, because they were kind of overpowering the music. So I've learnt to sort of not back things, like be kind of in the background or be kind of at least sort of like go up and down with the music rather than fighting it. So I guess that's learning things like just learning that you're part of a bigger project. It's not all about you, which is kind of the way that some artists might be used to making their work. So yeah, in terms of key learning moments, it's all been learning on the job, learning by doing and then reflecting, which again, some of those kind of things that were put in place on the Nape programs were really fascinating, and I've learnt a lot by working with musicians. I've learnt a lot about my own capabilities and my own kind of limits as well. Not trying to do everything, trying to delegate more, or at least be more realistic in what can be achieved in a limited amount of time, with a very basic kit. So yeah, but being realistic, and being kind of knowing your own kind of capabilities, not to not be ambitious, but also not to kind of like overstretch and try and be everywhere at once and try and do everything, because it won't happen. So when I've gone on to do, say, the project in China, there was time to do a few meetings with at least the Manchester contingent before we went to China, dealing with a language barrier, dealing with like being in a high pressure kind of environment to deliver something at the end of 8 days, in a city that we didn't know, in a language we didn't speak. All that kind of awareness of like what is useful to sort of work in the framework of what can be achieved with the amount of money, with the amount of kit, with the amount of resources, all that stuff, means that you can be a bit more kind of strategic in what you're going to do. With the Sven Helbig project, that was I had a lot more time to rehearse, a lot more time to practice and feel confident, because I live in the city where the venue is, and I could go into the space and I could
give them very specific technical requirements. For me, it's about the projector, because I can do all this stuff on the computer, but actually if it's a crap projector and it's a tiny screen and no one can see it, it's kind of pointless and embarrassing for everybody. It's awkward for everybody. So having a good sort of understanding of technical requirements, or technical rider at the very least, and being able to test and have time and space where there's no pressure. It's just about you and your element of the collaboration to get the visuals right. In my case, obviously there's things like sound checks for musicians for very right reasons, just so everyone's happy and can just deliver the thing on the night. All that stuff is happening, hopefully with video, a couple of days in advance, so that there's no nasty surprises. You don't have to run out to get an adapter, you don't have to run out to get another lead, you're not hanging off a wall, or like you're not able to have been stood on a balcony that I can hardly see what's happening. So those kind of things of learning to prepare and to communicate and to listen, they're all really vital, and I've used them in other kinds of work, other kinds of projects. So every time that I've done a project with musicians, it's set me up for working in a better kind of collaborative way in things like short films that I might do for art galleries, or I might do for festival screenings, that kind of thing. I think that's it. I'm just scanning your other notes, but yeah, really cross arts stuff, if we're going to call it that. It's been really vital to sort of like being able to develop my own practice, even when it's not cross arts stuff, because I'm just a bit more aware of what can be achieved in a very short time, and those experiences have always been really dear to me, just in terms of like really, really good and vital experiences that I'm still really a bit proud to be associated with. And yeah. Okay, bye bye.